After the great Valby tragedy of 2024, I was lost in mistranslation, and I knew with the amount of gold I had left, I had to make something that would allow me to not get smacked by Gluttony in one hit, while at the same time allow us to farm everything that we need for the impending nerfs that are probably going to end up coming to Gley later on for whatever reason. So, today we have the everyday Gley build. This is a build that works for mobbing, bossing, and you can throw in a bunch of different weapons and whatnot and have fun with it. And inside the videos there's going to be a lot of topics answered, so your questions are probably going to be covered. So we have Q, C, V, and Z at the bottom. I'm going to refer to them as skill 1, skill 2, skill 3, and skill 4, because we also have some good old console players, so that way you have a better understanding of the rotation. And of course, some people swap out their mapping for their controls and whatnot as well. So, the basic premise of Gley when you are running Massacre is to get your resources at the bottom, which are the life orbs, and we circumvent the need to pick up those orbs by killing the mobs by running this mod called Massive Sanguification. Now, what this is going to allow us to do is to not only be able to cast this without the cost, but also we can utilize this to heal and gain those 3 life spheres so we can immediately go into Massacre. Let's go to do that right here. I'm going to press Q or 1. This is going to put us inside a frenzy, and then while in frenzy we're going to press our 2, and that gets us our 3 orbs. And then we're going to press 4 for Massacre. Now you only have 3 shots because that's the amount of life orbs that you had inside of your bar at the bottom, your custom resource. So if we just change shot like that, we run out of ammo pretty much immediately. But what you do then is press your 3. And you just hold down and fire. And you want to look at that icon that is ticking down that was in the middle. And that icon is the thing that you want to kind of pay attention to when it comes to micromanaging. But with this setup, with how much duration we don't have to micromanage at all. So we can hit some very, very clean loops without having to worry about anything at all. So in order to get that perfect loop that we just talked about, we have a duration that is higher than our cooldown, 7.6 and 7.5. So in order to get a cooldown that is this low, you're going to need a reactor that has scale cooldown on it. Ideally gold, but I put on this purple just to kind of check if it's still low enough, but this purple ends up working. And where you get the reactors right now are difficulty level rewards. And we are going to look for a non-attribute dimension. And right here in Muskeg Swamp. And the best quests for these are the Tree of Truth. You turn on each one of the nodes, and then you can just spam farm the bosses with the mobbing portion of the build. Multitalented is another option that can lower down your cooldown. Now this can give you negative 20% cooldown reduction, and also it can end up boosting up your all attribute damage. This is not going to apply to your weapon damage increases, but just the damage that you get from your skill power. So let's go ahead and take a look at our skills real quick. Frenzied is singular, which will then proc the plus 30% attribute damage. We got Massive Sang, which is Dimension, another singular in our 3, and then we got Massacre, which is Dimension. So what we're going to go ahead and do is proc our Dimension skill so that we get the skill cooldown, so that way we are able to get a clean loop with the infinite ammo. So when it comes to multi-talented, you can only have one of these buffs up at the same time. So we're popping this, and that's going to go ahead and give us our cooldown. While that's up, we pop our 3. And as you can see, our cooldown is back already. We're able to maintain stacks, and now we get a nice damage boost for these last few shots, which is very, very nice. So inside those short spurts, this can do fantastic damage. It's a very, very nice combo. Now, when it comes to the situation where you're just sitting there and blasting, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. We love lag in game. So now, in order to get the cooldown again, I had to pop C, but I ended up losing my stacks. So it's interesting. It's not as fluid as just getting the cooldown on your reactor, but at the same time, it does have its benefits. So you can play around with it, see what you enjoy, because multi-talented is an option. Personally, I'm leaning towards just having the cooldown on the reactor. When you utilize Massacre, you are able to scale a separate proc of damage that is based off of your skill power modifier, and can be enhanced by non-attribute as well as dimension. So here we have a couple numbers. We have the 2,927, that is from electricity, 41,000. Now that is actually from the gun's base damage itself. Now that we can tell is because it is a yellow number. Yellow number is weak point, and the damage that we deal from the Massacre proc cannot proc weak point, but it can proc crit. So the number that we are paying attention to is the 23,000. Here we're going to take the Piercing Light. This has a 193,000 firearm attack in comparison to the almost 10,000 from the firearm attack of the Python, and we will see if this number ends up increasing. Another big mechanic that is part of Gley's kit is that the lower her HP is, the more damage she ends up dealing. And so we are at that same number of 9,645, and let's go ahead and get the shot off. And you see right there, we got the exact same number, 23,124. So now that that segment is out of the way, time to hop into America's favorite pastime, and that's good old guns. So we use the Python mainly inside this build. If you do have a Thunder Cage that's built out and you have a good reactor for it, please run that. The damage difference between the two is not that much. I've always seen the Python do more. I've done more tests with, well, I've done more tests with the Thunder Cage to be honest, but I've done tests with the Python as well as the Thunder Cage, and I've always seen the Python pull out ahead. 8-second Devourer, 7-second Devourer runs, and I would love to see a 8-second to 7-second run using the Thunder Cage. That would be fantastic because the Thunder Cage is a better general gun, while the Python is a better bossing gun. So either one you find roles for, please run with that. The resources inside this game are limited, as well as time. It is not that big of a difference between the two. So here's what we have built on our good old Python. So here's what we have on the Python currently. You can swap out this element for something that the enemy is weak to. And we're rocking mental focus instead of sharp precision shot because this build does not have as much of a duration as the last one. And we're just focused on getting the loot and keeping the stacks up. So once you get to this point in the build, there's not really too much that you can add that would really give you a nice boost. Although you can add electric priority and match whatever your enhancement is, and then ideally have it match whatever is on the Python itself in the substats. You're not getting that much of a damage increase. And then let's say you slot it electric priority. The only things that you can add left that would actually make some bit of sense are going to be the crit mods right here. These are going to work out fantastic if you end up getting an Enzo, but we're building off of the 5% critical hit rate. And at this point, it's cool, but unless you really want to min-max the Python, I'd probably leave it alone. And something that I've been messing around with and I've been testing, because people have been saying that actually doesn't work, and I've also heard that recoil does not work for Massacre. So I went ahead and did some tests, and we're going to show you some good old visuals. So we can see right here, swap over to our Python. We're going to keep it nice and simple. We're just going to shoot the gun normally and see how the recoil is without me micromanaging anything. Let's go ahead and aim for like a little white spot right here because we want to do recoil first. And you can see where we end up at. And it actually resets to the same spot, which is actually fantastic. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to press Z, so that way we have Massacre up. Or 4, rather. And see our whole recoil pattern actually changes, which is pretty crazy. and that did not reset, which would have been really, really nice. So it puts us right about right there, and originally about right here. So let's go ahead and throw recoil onto our Python. We got a fixed shot. Pretty much the same spot. Let's try that again. And we did not drift up all the way up here. We stopped right here. Something that we can look at is a sheet that we have inside the game. To be honest, the sheet is not 100% accurate all the time. So that is one of the important things about testing. So you can see right here, when we press I and then go into info, we have the information for Python. And more importantly, we're going to look at the recoil, 0.277. Then we'll look at the accuracy a little bit later. So keep that in mind, 0.277. Now, when we end up pressing our Massacre, and then we go back to that same spot, we're looking for recoil, and now it is not 0.277. It is a completely different number. And you see that the other stats are also different. You see that these things ended up getting modified. Crit rate is 5% instead of 1% on Python. Critical hit damage. So it becomes a whole different gun, and you can see this in action. So our crosshair here. Nothing too crazy. And let's go ahead and try with the accuracy on. Our crosshair definitely got smaller. But then it looks like it goes back to the original size pretty quickly. We'll do a side by side, so we can go ahead and actually give it a look. So at first, accuracy started off a bit less in terms of the crosshair size, and then later on, they look like they're the exact same size. Looks like it's 1-to-1. So if you're putting something inside that slot, I would go ahead and put recoil so you can manage that. Otherwise, just stack some more damage. So here are the rolls that we have. Like I mentioned earlier, electric type would be really, really nice. Firearm attack, bonus firearm attack versus Colossus, and the weak point damage. You don't want crit damage nor crit rate. For the Thunder Cage, weak point damage, you want firearm crit damage, as well as firearm attack versus Colossus, and then firearm attack instead of the critical hit rate. And here we have this super built out for a Pyromancer test that we did against the Python a little bit earlier. Otherwise, you would end up getting rid of this so that way you can run an element to boost up versus the enemy that you're fighting. You can even like fully commit to electric for the points that we talked about earlier. Here's our Afterglow sword, a fantastic, fantastic weapon. Now, these are the roles that we're looking for. Inside of team-based fights, I have been able to out-DPS my Massacre setup sometimes if I'm hitting those correct shots, while at the same time on single target fights, there are going to be ones where the Python and Thunder Cage are just going to outperform if you are solo running around. So in terms of order of weapons that I would build to get to the end game, it would be Vestigial Organ, because it takes low investment to get everything up and running, Python or Thunder Cage, and then if you want a cool side grade, a slight upgrade for the later game fights, if you want to be a little bit further away, Afterglow sword is very, very good for that. But you had to hit the shots. So I've been playing around with the weak point expansion variation. Real life fighter will end up giving you more damage. I really like to hip fire sniper rifles and try to hit the weak point spot. I'm not really sure why, but it's just a thing that I like to do, and it does a lot of damage. So in terms of the build, early game setup is the exact same thing with the rifling reinforcement, action and reaction, and then fire rate up. But fire rate up, if you are zooming in and you're not capitalizing on the fire rate up, then you would go ahead and put in an element. So the reason why we do not have element on this weapon is because we have added insight focus. This is going to provide us with a little bit more chance to crit. So as you can see, it is a 6.5 drop to not have this, and a little bit of a crit damage drop. So when you do not crit and you hit a weak point on Gluttony, it's like 400k, but when you do crit, it is over 1 million. So it is a big difference. If you did crit and have the element on, then it would be a higher damage number, of course, but I just want a little bit more consistency inside the build. Now, weak point, we'll go right back into this. If you don't want to run weak point for the one hit and you do like scoping into the weapon, then special sight is going to be fantastic for you. And then at this rate, I would probably swap out a fire rate and go with an element. So that way you're able to capitalize on zooming in, get the big damage number, and the big old hit. But overall, there's not too big of a difference between those different options. I just like to hit fire a lot. This is a Vestigial organ. This thing will get you through actually everything inside the game, other than Gluttony. On the Gluttony fight, it is not the best thing to use because you are increasing the frenzy bar at a pretty decent rate on top of the gauge that is on his arm, while you're not doing as much damage per hit as something like a sniper rifle. But other than that, you can run this bad boy all around. So you want an element, electric, once again, is fantastic. Then you want firearm attack versus Colossus. Explosive attack will also be very good. And then weak point is an option because you can hit weak point with this, or you can go with the attribute trigger rate, so that way you get more applications of the dot that you're applying due to the enhancement that you have on. So the enhancement is the thing that does end up applying the dot. And another thing to keep in mind, this has a base 33% trigger rate, and since you're shooting it so fast, you're going to get those dots pretty often. This has such a high number for the element due to having a high explosive attack. You're going to go ahead and get a very, very nice boost to the overall damage that you're dealing, just from the dot itself, really. So here we have fire enhancement as well as fire conductor, but you can use whatever element and kind of combine it to do as much damage as possible to the enemy that you're dealing with. So something like the Devourer, you would go electric enhancement and then electric conductor, for example. So Peacemaker is a pretty cool gun. Do not have mine built out just yet, so we'll save that for a later video. But the one cool thing about it is that a unique ability, when we use a dimension skill, we're able to proc single reload for peace. And Gley just so happens to have a good couple of dimension skills, including the one that you can use that has 0 CD. So we can spam this, get this up to 5. And I was hoping we could bypass the reload by going infinite ammo, but unfortunately we cannot. Still a cool gun though, still playing around with it. And here I have my piercing light. Weak point damage over the critical hit rate would be slightly better, but I'm just using it purely for the demonic mod, which is the one that allows you to do a lot of damage if you charge up a shot and just hope for a big crit. So we have built into the idea of attempting to hit a big crit. So I swapped out some firearm attack for a chance of being a little bit more consistent. You can see here that the chance is 67.6%, but in reality it is actually not that at all. So it's the same case that we talked about earlier, where we look at the good old stats, and you see that we're at 71% critical hit rate. But if we pop demonic, our critical hit rate drops down to 36%. So it is a drastic drop, and not very consistent, unfortunately. For your reactor for the setup, whatever your main weapon is at the time is what you're going to go ahead and look for the mounting. And it's going to be the materialized phase reactor, which we talked about the location to find those for the next few days. the main subsets that you're looking for are going to be skill cooldown, skill attack versus Colossus is good, dimension skill, non-attribute skill, and also HP heal modifier is a pretty good thing to look for. So since I'm playing around with a demonic variation of this build where I'm running this demonic modification, I'm running around with the Afterglow 99% of the time, and then when I have enough orbs, I go to swap to this, which I get the extra mounting damage, and I get the big old hits in. That's the way that this general build ends up working out. And I have the Python on for Gluttony. I do not have on the launcher. So this is my setup that I use for Gluttony. So we are back to using the Annihilation set. The Slayer set for this build in particular, since we're not really using the skill power as the main boost or the main thing that we're scaling off of, we utilize the Annihilation set so that we were able to get the firearm attack increase as well as the skill duration. Max HP is very, very good. And the most important thing that I found for Gluttony is going to be having chill resistance. Chill resistance and consumable drop rate is going to allow you to consistently see a little bit more health packs, while at the same time you do not get one shot. You know, fortunately for me, I get killed in 3 hits. So, you know, that's more than enough to die a little bit later. And we got defense on here, which is pretty nice, as well as this Annihilation processor, which can have some better stuff for sure. So I need to go back and get to farming. But yeah, 40,000 defense is very good, 20,000 HP, so we're nice and bulky, nice and tanky, as well as can heal pretty consistently from the things on the ground. And Mass Sanguine can still heal pretty decently if there's enough enemies, but if there are about 3 enemies, which is typically the case with the spawns, it is not the greatest at the moment, because we do not get the benefit from healing off of the objects that are around us. If you want to hit a clean loop, you're going to need something like this and a decent cooldown reactor. It doesn't necessarily have the magic element in order for you to hit the clean loop. And then of course you want to go ahead and add defense. Shield conversion is higher than increased defense. I prefer the extra bulk rather than adding a little bit extra damage from iron defense and spear and shield. And then I would honestly say after this is added, or even before this is added, it's going to feel really, really good to run around with. Because once I found this thing helped me out a whole lot. Here we have the demonic sniper setup, which I am running demonic instead of Sang most of the time. We're going to talk about the massacre and the mobbing setup as well. So, one big thing to note, I did end up swapping out one of our R polarities for another X one. The R polarity did give us something really cool with skill expansion. This is going to allow us to AoE a bit better and could work really clean inside the setup, as well as the fact that we were able to heal off the objects that were around us. We were healing a lot consistently utilizing this. But due to us having so much defense and it being redundant now, and then also that change that occurred, I swapped this out for an X because this is going to allow us to get more healing along with this right here. And X in general has some absolutely monstrous mods. So you can do something like walk a tightrope for that extra damage and combine that with something like HP collector if you're killing those different enemies. Or if you don't want walk a tightrope, you can go with dangerous ambush and do a lot of damage. There are a lot of good combinations with double X, and that is what we rotated over to. Do you need to have the double X in order for this build to work well? No, you don't. You don't need to do that at all. But I found for that to be a bit better due to how nerfed Sang has been with that change that they ended up making. So yeah, the overall build, pretty basic function. This one works very similar to just a Massacre setup, where you're getting cooldown as well as some power from having focus on dimension and focus on non-attribute. The whole core rotation of this particular variation of the build is you shoot the enemy, shoot the enemy, shoot the enemy, end up getting the orbs, and then you just so happen to be able to hit big numbers with demonic, since it's not the main focal point. So I'm going to show you the healing that we end up getting without having the 2 mods on, and then with the mods on as well. We have 5,000 and we're getting 4,200 which is not too bad at all. Let's see how much we end up healing with the buffs on. Try not to get the orb. Yes, 7,145. So 3,000 more HP. So almost double. So that number was due to the HP heal modifier as well as the 2 mods. You can actually get that same roll on your good old sensor. But due to the fact that we need chill, you had to pick between consumable or the heal modifier. So another cool thing about these mods are that you're recovering a bit more with your massive sanguification as well. So there we just got 1,068. Let's go ahead and throw on one of these. 1,378. 1,622. If you really want to lean completely into running the sniper, then you can do something along the lines of this, where you drop focus on dimension, focus on non-attribute. That way you free up a lot of points. And you can go ahead and swap one of these. Like shot focus if you really want to have like that consistent damage increase. And then with that you can do like walk a tightrope. You can do something like that. Since these don't need to be maxed in order to do max damage with the Afterglow, you can just play around with these slots and really can put, I was about to say you really can put anything, but you really can put almost anything in here. Was it 16? Yeah, this is a 16. So you can add more cold resistance or more range or whatever. So here's the mobbing build, where we have the 0 cooldown massive saying, utilizing this, and this is not a Ultimate Gley exclusive at all. So we're running these two, and I did not realize that I did not have extra defense. So that is something that if you're just playing base Gley, you might want to adjust this a little bit by lowering your HP and slotting in a defense mod over this, because Ultimate Gley does have a bit more base defense to play with. Inside of Frenzy, you can go ahead and hit with your 2, which is your massive saying. And then when the damage numbers pop up, you go ahead and press your 1 again or your Q. So it'll look like this. And you'll be able to get the damage effect as well as the heal. So you can just chain do that. And you heal back a lot, which we showed at the beginning of the video. So the max range for this is 27, and we're maxed out. Yeah, so you have more range than Bunny, which is pretty cool at 34.4. So you can still get a little bit more too. Here's the Massacre setup. Because originally the demonic sniper was more walk a tightrope and had a few more variations to it. I had shot focus in here. But yeah, they're pretty much very similar. I just needed battle of stamina in order to get the clean loop. Periodically check on that pinned comment. I have some updates with some things coming through there. And then I got the good old Discord and the cool old creator code inside the pinned comment as well. And for Gluttony, I would 100% recommend joining somebody's Discord. Doesn't have to be mine, doesn't have to be Willis's, doesn't have to be Moxie, doesn't have to be Mr. Beast or the main Discord, or First Descendant. But joining somebody's would probably be a pretty good idea, because it is horrendous in solo queue. And yeah, I'm gonna keep on solo queuing and enjoying that, so that way I can get the full experience. That's all for me. Here's a nice little Molten Fortress that I did with the build, which is a little bit inflated due to shooting some of the meteors, but that is the game. Adios.